All right. Welcome to the Athletic Foundations Workshop Series. Today we have Monique Johnson, the founder of Restorative Counseling Services, here to speak on performance anxiety. Monique, take it away.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So as DJ mentioned, my name is Monique. I am the owner of Restorative Counseling Services, and we provide a variety of services to children, families, couples, and so forth. And so we have had the pleasure of working with athletes over the past couple of years. So when asked to do this presentation on performance anxiety, you know, I got kind of excited because this is what they all come to me is with the same thing. It's like, you know, doing a game, you know, not wanting to fail, you know, not losing scholarships and things like that. So what I want to talk about today is just understanding, recognizing, and coping with performance anxiety. As I did over the past more research on it, it's something that a lot of people actually do suffer with, more than we know. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just when it impedes your day-to-day functioning or your ability to perform, that's when it becomes a thing that we have to address at a different level. So one thing I wanted to talk about, like, what is performance anxiety? And how common is it? It's very common. While some people become pumped up during competition, if you interpret the search words as adrenaline, as anxiety, negative thoughts can take over. This can interfere with your ability to perform. So one thing about performance anxiety is everything is related back to the mind, which is one thing we work a lot with in counseling, is changing thoughts and perceptions. So this really plays into something that I work with and challenge people with every day. So before you learn how to manage the symptoms of anxiety during competitions, it's critical to understand the relationship between anxiety and athletic performance. So what is anxiety? The clinical anxiety disorder is different than performance anxiety. And I'll get to explain a little bit why later. But clinical anxiety, also referred to as GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, is marked by an excessive, exaggerated anxiety and worry about everything life events for no obvious reason. People with these symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder tend to always expect disaster and can't stop worrying about health, money, family, work, or school life. Now that's very different than performance anxiety. So let's talk about that. Performance anxiety is a fear about one's ability to perform a specific task. People experiencing performance anxiety may worry about failing a task before it has even begun. They might believe failure will result in humiliation or rejection. So let's reel that in. As far as the DSM as therapists and physicians, we don't generalized anxiety disorder is something that we call a mental health issue because it does impede your day-to-day functioning. You exaggerate, we call it catastrophizing events, and your mind is constantly just wondering, well, a lot of people who have anxiety, they don't sleep well because although they're laying down in the bed at a certain time, their mind never shuts off. And so what people don't know, they're like, oh, I didn't get any sleep, my mind was just racing. Well, that's a form of anxiety. And so that impedes everything that they do day to day, from relationships to sports to driving to what they eat, standing in line. When people have generalized anxiety disorder, they're affected in everyday functioning. Now, performance anxiety is narrowed down more to when one has to perform a specific things. You know, we go back to test anxiety. People have a lot of issues with taking tests. They do well in the classroom, do well in assignments, but when it comes time to take that test, they just have an absolute come apart. So a lot test anxiety and performance anxiety is geared around something specific. So it's not so much a mental health issue. It's more so an issue that someone has to work in with a particular constraint, if that makes sense. So, athletic performance. Anxiety during any athletic competition can interfere with your performance as an athlete. The coordinated movement required by athletes events becomes increasingly difficult when your body is in a tense state. I mean, just imagine being tensed up, worrying about how you're going to perform, and you're paying baseball, like that impedes your ability to swing a bat or catch a ball. That's just an example. While a certain level of physical arousal is helpful and prepares us for competition, when the physical symptoms of anxiety are too great, they may seriously interfere with your ability to compete. A certain amount of worry about how you perform can be helpful in competition. And I'll show you a graph about that later in the presentation. But at the same time, negative thought patterns and expectations of failure can bring about self-fulfilling prophecy. So you go to performance, and that one thing about how you will perform at a particular sport or event, if you don't take like that incident right there and deal with that, and it becomes something bigger, then you have a bigger problem. So if you go and you say, okay, I'm at a new stadium, and performance anxiety happens often when teams play away from home versus in their regular city, in their regular gym, and their regular football field, they have an increased amount of anxiety when going to play at the opposing team's place. So with that being said, if you take that anxiety about a specific issue, say a punter, their job is to kick the ball. They're worried about getting the ball through the net or through the I don't know what it's called, but y'all know what I'm talking about, that thing.
The upright.
So they're worried about getting the ball through the uprights. So now if that's their focus, and their adrenaline is about performing in that specific thing, how they move their foot, how they, kick off. But if they take that thought and generalize that I'm a bad kicker, I'm a bad player, I shouldn't have been on this team, then you have a whole nother series of just meltdowns. So it's one thing to just be focused, having anxiety about a specific task that you're about to perform versus taking that and generalizing to everything about you. So that's something athletes do, but in this process of performance anxiety, one of the tips is to help kind of put things into perspective and focus on the one thing that you're doing. So this is the graph I talked about earlier. So you have levels to how we get to places, and every place has a downside, upside, and just right side. So what this shows us is when we're bored and we're depressed, our energy is very low. We're not open to doing anything. We're not trying anything different. We just kind of blah. So then you have something that's like, oh, okay, this has increased my attention. It's, strike a peak for me. So let me see what this is about. So now you're not bored, but you're just interested, right? So that takes you up the level. So you have optimal performance where you go from being bored, interested, like, okay, this is what I'm doing. I got this. This is what ideally where we want players to be, is optimal performance. Because if you stay there, then you're in a good place. But then if you have strong anxiety about, okay, now I want to be here. Oh, am I going to do well at this? Oh, well, what would someone think if I don't do this right? And then that goes to when now I'm a bad person. Now we got a complete meltdown and nothing gets done. So between strong anxiety and increased attention, there's optimal performance, which where we want our players to be at all times. Does it take different shifts to get there? Absolutely. Does everybody just come in with optimal performance? No, not always, but there are ways to get there and be safe and not just take one situation and it become your whole life that you're just struggling with everything. So this is a good diagram to use when I talk to my high school kids who come in and we talk about sports, and everybody wants to go to the NBA or NFL in the 8th grade. I don't know. That's just the thing. So I just talk to them about, where you are now, how are you performing? And we use this graph as it relates to school and all other aspects, because we know most times academics, school is a way for you to get, that's an avenue to sports on a different level, because they have to see you somewhere, people have to make tapes and all that type of stuff. So I actually use this graph for more than one thing. So the zone. I've heard players say this all the time. I've heard commentators say this all the time. You're in your zone. And the zone is basically your optimal performance. It's a special place that athletes recognize, and it's the right amount of anxiety. It helps performance to be more consistent, automatic, and fluent. The athlete is able to ignore pressure. That means they do not overthink and let the body deliver the performance that has been learned so well. because we know all these players, I don't know anybody who doesn't practice. So everybody has the ability to go into a game and duplicate skills that they've been taught in practice. It's just a matter of ignoring the negative thoughts and not overthinking things, which keeps them in optimal performance. So my next slide is I want to talk about athletes who experience performance anxiety. So as I was doing this, a friend of mine told me about a player who, I forget his name. I actually put him in the slide, but he was like, he threw up before every game. I'm like, what? And then he was fine. He performed well. And so I did a little research and I found out there are quite a few people who throw up before games in every sport. And I was like, this is quite interesting. And then when you think about anxiety, you think about your stomach and your gut, that would make sense. Either going to the bathroom or throwing up. It's like letting something out, which is like anxiety, so you can go ahead and perform at optimal level. So I learned that the MMA fighter, Donna Cowboy, is an unabashed pre-fight pucker, as he recently revealed on Twitter that he vomits before each match. The MMA fighter has enjoyed a fair amount of success. His overall record currently stands at 27 wins and 6 losses. So I'm just like, oh, this is a thing. So when I saw his, and I said, well, let me pull up a different sport. Oh, then we got football. Cole Beasley, he throwing up before every game too. So, so what is this thing with vomit? I'm looking for somebody to give me some other sign that, you know, whatever they use to deal with anxiety. But everybody's kind of on the same thing of just throwing up. But again, it makes sense to get out that nervousness so you can go ahead and perform at optimal performance. But what they say about Cole Beasley is if you ask professional football players, which player are most likely to be the ones who vomit before games, the most frequent response would be the big guys who occupy the offensive and defensive lines. That's not the case with Cowboys wide receiver Cole Beasley. After throwing up during a preseason game in 2012, he admitted that he throws up before most every game, saying in the ESPN article, "You'll probably see me throw up a lot more than just then. I throw up a lot before the game too. I'm not ashamed of it." And I was so glad that he was able to say that, because they're normalizing this behavior. They're not saying there's something wrong with you because you throw up after each game. They're saying that it's performance anxiety and everybody gets it, and that's normal. Now, throwing up and performing, great. And when you throw up and you consistently throw up and you don't stop throwing up so you can't play, now we have a whole different issue. So for the most part of these professional players and some high school players, they have a thing that they do before each game that helps them soothe their anxiety. And for these two and this third one, it's throwing up. So we have Glenn Hall, the legendary Chicago Blackhawks goalie, who was so nervous for the games, he would literally cause himself to vomit in the locker room. This began while he was still playing in juniors, but the routine will follow him all the way through his Hall of Fame NHL career. It became such a part of his pregame routine that he worried he wouldn't play well if he didn't throw up. That was quite interesting. According to his teammates, Glenn, all of the Hall's fellow Blackhawks felt sorry for him. You know, it wasn't put on him. He was genuinely that nervous before each game. So it's just like, it happens to everyone, to different people in different sports. So if anybody's watching this, if you have a thing that you have to do to ease your nerves before each game, don't feel like something is wrong with you. Just understand this is where your body releasing unnecessary anxiety so you can perform at an optimal level. So we talked about anxiety, we talked about performance anxiety. So let's talk about what to do. We're going to talk about 2 things to put in your toolbox to help you with performance anxiety. So first, we have help athletes change focus to action, process focus. Action focus means being able to concentrate effectively on what you want to accomplish, not how. Quick feet, not wasting your time worrying about results. Action focus is more likely the most basic mind-body skill for success. The most basic action focus is breathing. When in doubt, breathe out. Do it and say it. Breathing has been shown time after time, study after study, that it is a calming technique. Now, you have to breathe correctly, because if you breathe too fast, you're going to hyperventilate. And I think people get that confused. They just, no, we want you to take deep breaths slowly and count. That helps relax your mind and calm you. So we don't want anybody to hyperventilate. A lot of people say breathing doesn't work because they don't do it correctly. Secondly, cognitive skills and self-talk. How athletes talk to themselves or how others talk with them can have a big influence on ramping up or ramping down anxiety. Thoughts equals emotions equals actions, and in this case equals performance. So if you think about it, when they get into huddles, nobody's really talking about in the huddle, I don't know if we're gonna win this because we lost last time. Nobody's saying that in huddles. In huddles, it's like, you got this, we're gonna kill them. It's just like this whole like rah of just like energy, and it's like pumping everybody up to be able to go out and perform at their best. So what goes in goes out. So if you pour in positivity, we're going to win, we got this, we're not going to be fearful, that goes in with the player when it goes in the game. But if you have people with negative self-talk or talking to themselves negatively, or you allow other people to talk negatively to you, that is going to come out in how you perform no matter what you want to do. So even though they talk negatively, which everybody is because the players get heckled all the time, it's hilarious in basketball. It's not hilarious when the players, lose focus, but I've seen people really just feel like they have a right to just kind of heckle players, and it's just too much. But you have to have good cognitive skills to like drown those people out, because their goal is to give you some type of anxiety and to get you off of your game. That's the whole point of it. I know I had a kid who plays basketball, and he got upset because his cousin said he was trash. And I was like, well, how do you think people talk on the court? And he said nicely, I was like, oh my God, you don't even have a clue. So I pulled up some clips for him and showed him how ball players talk on the court. It is reckless. So the idea is that we're all in this space because we're good. So I can't take your talent from you, but if I can get into your head, then I can get into this game. So I teach that a lot to my kids and my teenagers, because it's a mind thing. So it's like you can't allow people to talk and put negative thoughts in your head, because it's definitely going to affect your performance. So then you go from in the game, in the zone, and then somebody saying you can't play, and now you're focused on what he said about you, and you're not focused on your layup. So cognitive skills and self-talk is a tool that is very necessary to alleviate performance anxiety that impedes your ability to perform. Again, performance anxiety is not a bad thing once you get it out and deal with it and move on. It's only a bad thing when it impedes your ability to play. So third thing, mind-body skills. We're going to use 3 A's: awareness, admit, accept, action for our steps for our focus. So we're going to be aware of what's happening with our body, admit that it's happening, and accept it. And then you have your action steps. So for example, the people who throw up, they are aware that they get queasy on the stomach when it's time to play a specific sport. Admitting it is like, yeah, I'm about to throw up. Accepting it is like, yeah, I did that. I threw up for that game. Yeah, I threw up for the last game too. And then the steps of focus will be, okay, this helps me. So my steps of focus is to make sure that I'm doing it. If I don't want anybody to know about it, that I'm doing it like in an appropriate place, or, or focusing on it happened, it's over, and not worried about what anybody thinks. So those are 3 tips. Another tip is changing self-talk. So we talked a little bit about that earlier, and it's easier said than done, because what our mind tends to do is to go to a negative thought first. If you ask somebody, how was their day? Most people will start off with what happened bad first. Oh, I got stuck in traffic. Oh, my car broke down. Oh, and they forget that, they had a job. They actually had somewhere to go. They had food to eat. They had friends they forget about all those things. So if you allow negative thoughts to be in the forefront of your head, then your self-talk is not going to be positive. It's going to be negative talk. So you have to refrain. Anxiety and excitement are connected. To consider the possibility of symptoms are related to excitement. If you want to use your anxiety as good energy, channel it. So when you start thinking about things whether it's before or after a game, you have to start off with positive thoughts, because if you don't, that's just going to dictate how you think and move going forward. So changing self-talk is important, and how to do it is to always think about the positive things first before you allow the negative things to come in. And then once you start really thinking about the positive things that are going right in your life, it kind of drowns out that negative stuff. So that's a tip. The fifth one is consistency. Your routine might include thoughts, images, emotions, and actions. So I know before most games, people have routines and rituals. I'm not sure. I know, DJ, you and your wife have been into sports for a while. That, did you guys have any specific routine that you did before you trained or before you participated in any sport that kind of kept you focused?
100%. I had to have my locker set up a specific way, and I went through the same process of getting taped, stretched, dressed, and then tying my cleats and having my helmet ready to go.
Okay, so that was a consistent routine that you did.
Practice and game.
And how do you think that helped you in your performance?
Well, through the consistency, it took a lot off my plate as far as worrying. And it just brought normalcy. So you spoke on like playing at away stadiums and whatnot. As long as that routine was solid, I had less anxiety.
Okay, that makes sense. So at away games, you were not able to set that locker up.
Not 100% like I would at home,
right?
Or have it set at home, but it still brought some normalcy because it was the same sequence of getting taped, stretched, and dressing in the same fashion.
Okay, makes sense. Okay.
And music.
And music.
I had a specific playlist.
Yes, music is a big thing. I've seen a lot of players before the game that they have their earbuds or something in, and they're like grooving some music. And I've known music can be very powerful in either heightening a mood or trying to suppress a mood. And so I always tell my clients, if you're in a bad mood or you sad, don't listen to Fantasia saying, if you don't want me, don't talk to me. Like, that's not what we want you to do. And, so if you want to be in a better mood, you want to listen to something uplifting. But a lot of times people want to listen to something that validates their mood, but what they fail to realize is they can't move from that space because of what they're pouring into themselves. Right. And that goes with everything that we've talked about. What you put into yourself is what you're going to get out, whether it's positive self-talk, camaraderie with your teammates. All those things play into your mental, which in turn plays into your performance. So the little things that we think are just little and minute are not little and minute. All of those things matter. Emotional power. Keep it simple. When you feel strong emotions, don't automatically respond. Oh my God, this is something I've been teaching people for don't act in your emotions. We are emotional creatures. So your emotions change like the wind. So 1 minute you're okay, and then you're frustrated, then you're aggravated. So if you followed your emotions, you just look like a leaf blowing in the wind, just all over the place. So waiting for your emotions to settle and then making decisions always helps you be better at whatever you're doing, no matter what it is. Learn the skills to take a step back. When you feel like your emotions are taking up the most of you, and they are strong, you want to respond to your emotion, I tell my people to pause. Put a pause before you say anything, put a pause before you do anything. In that pause, you're taking a moment to breathe, and you're taking a moment to really think about the next thing that you're going to say out your mouth, because it can have lasting effects what you say or do next. When that emotion to power up and give yourself focus. And action step, converting negative energy to positive, psych up and not psych out. Ask yourself, which one are you doing? Are you psyching yourself up or are you psyching yourself out? So if you look at what we've been talking about for the majority of the time, almost everything goes back to the psyche. It goes back to the mind. And that's going to always be the thing that's going to drive you in one direction or the other. If you can have the best skills and be the most athletic, the best player ever, But if your mental isn't right, that doesn't mean anything. You're not going to be able to perform because you're not in the headspace as you need to be. There's so many talented people that have missed opportunities to be the next LeBron or the next Michael Jordan or the next, what's the guy next? Tom Brady, because they have psyched themselves out that they couldn't do it. They weren't capable of it. And it all starts up here. So emotional power is a very big thing to be in control of when you're wanting to reduce or be in control of performance anxiety. Visualizations is good. So DJ talked about music. Some people have to watch things, or some people close their eyes and they visualize them making a touchdown. They visualize themselves, shooting the winning shot. Like I always say, if you can see it, you can do it. So it's like, for me, when I wanted to be in certain places in my life, I would visualize myself there to the point where I was deep into it. I could smell what was going on around me. I could feel like I could touch things. And so that just made me get up, be more motivated to do it because I saw it. And so if you can see something, whether you're visualizing or you take a picture of it or you see it somewhere else, then it makes it real to you and you can get up and you can work towards it. So visualization is very important in your ability to deal with performance anxiety. If you can visualize yourself going out and participating in that sport and doing well, then the prognosis that you're going to do well is going to be high. Research also shows that imagining being successful before competing can have a positive effect on performance. Visualizing or body poses that help to alleviate testosterone and decrease cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So visualization is another tool that you can put in your toolbox. If you can see it, then you can do it. So that's another acronym that Butler discussed in 1996 called the pressure, where you want to prepare. Athletes must be psychologically prepared for what they will face. And he didn't say physiologically, he said psychologically. Relax, demographic breathing exercises may be necessary prior to competition in order to prevent over arousal. Okay, so that's relax. So that means what we talked about, breathing, making sure you have those breaths. Externalize, the belief that problems are not within me. This can help athletes when they feel there are too many demands on them. And that goes back to only focus on what you have control over. Not being focused on things you have no control over is a recipe for a panic attack or anxiety, period. Stay positive. Acknowledgement of the importance that individuals should have confidence in their ability. Single-minded. Stay focused on the task at hand. This can be used both in training and competition. If you're focusing on how to be a better catcher, then you don't need to be focusing on how to maybe run or what your uniform looks like. No, in that moment, be focused on one thing at a time. Unite. And this is particularly good when used with teammates. This component encourages athletes to consider what roles others will fulfill and the importance of working together as a team throughout the competition. And performance anxiety decreases when you're in a team format because it's not just you, everybody's watching, they're watching the team. But when you're in a single-handed sport where it's just you, that's when performance anxiety is at its peak. And that's when all of these things really come into play for you to be able to, pour those things into yourself. Reevaluate how important this event in the real world. So, you have some people who maybe participate in like a scrimmage, and it's not a game that's going to go against anybody's record. It's a scrimmage. Not saying that you shouldn't perform at your best, but your anxiety should not be a 10 when you're at a scrimmage. Like, you need to be focused on, okay, I'm just sharpening my skills. We're having play dates or whatever that looks like so I can be better for the game. Extend yourself. Give your best performance every time, no matter how important or unimportant the competition is. So it sounds like they contradict each other, but what you want to do is do your best, but you don't want to over-rationalize in your head as if it's a life or death situation. That's what the reevaluate part is. Some people go into a competition thinking if they don't win or get a certain score, then nothing else matters and they're done. When in actuality, it's just that event, it's just that game, and they have other opportunities to do better. In conclusion, only focus on the things you can control. That's going to be the biggest thing in dealing with any type of anxiety. Focusing on being present, mindful in the here and now, focusing on things that you can control will reduce any type of anxiety, no matter what it is. As Will Smith said, let your body perform. Your hands are wiser than your head will ever be. So you have to get to a place, you have to trust what you've been taught. You have to trust the gift that you've been given and go with it and not question yourself. That goes back into pouring positive thoughts into yourself. So with all these tips and tools, I hope that it's beneficial to someone, to let them know they're not alone. They're not weird. Nothing's wrong with them. Performance anxiety is completely normal. It's just when it gets to the point where it impedes your ability to function, it's when we have to look at really using these tools and being a part of a circle of people who can always encourage you.